Ground passers, welcome. It's Anastasia, and with me today is not Nick Carter. No, it's not. He's American too. Hey, Mitch.
Anastasia, thanks for inviting me on the show. I'm excited. I'm a little scared to be on this end of it, getting interviewed. But it's kind of nice to have somebody else driving. So I'm just going to follow your lead today, but it should be fun.
Yeah, this is a little different for you. You're usually the one doing all the questioning, but for our audience who doesn't know, Mitch Michals, who are you, and how did you get into tennis?
Wow, that's a pretty open-ended question. So I feel like I'm back in high school answering, filling out some admissions exams. But no, I'm.
What's your name?
Yeah, exactly. I don't have my name tag on, but no, I've just been at Tennis Channel for over like 8 years now, on the podcast front for about 3.5, hosting Tennis Channel Inside In, also hosting Tennis Bets on our YouTube and Tennis Bets Twitter and Facebook page. So there's your cheap plug there. But no, just a part of the tennis bubble now, gets to interview really legends and coaches and players, and excited to kind of learn each and every time I do it. So in short, I'm a podcast host that's getting to cover this beautiful game and loving it every day and learning more and more. And there's not much of a shortage of things to talk about, because every day, I don't know what the prep was like for this show, but you have to adjust it. You can't have anything firmly written down, because there'll be just a crazy upset that'll just completely change every plan that you had for topics and jumping off points. But we wouldn't have it any other way.
No, if anyone's been watching Canada with all the rain, it's like, what plans could you make? Are the finals today or are they tomorrow? Like, when are they going to be? But yeah, have you ever played tennis, or were you a fan when you were younger?
So the answer to both is yes. And I'll preface it with, I was never a competitive tennis player. I grew up in a family of athletes. My dad and uncle were football players. My younger brother was a college football player as well. So they all had that background. I actually played competitive ice hockey through college. Tennis was something that started in our family because my dad, after football and trying to stay in shape, just wanted something to do. Fell in love with tennis probably after the McEnroe era. Took lessons, got to be club level. He still plays today, pushing 70. We grew up around it, playing it, so I could say that I'm passably good at tennis. Solid is the word we use a lot in our family. But the biggest thing for tennis for me was the means to stay in shape and have fun while doing it. In college and high school, when I was dedicating my life to being the best hockey player I could, we'd play in the summers, and it was the best cardio way to stay in shape and stay active. So it's also fun to beat someone that's slightly better than you. Like, there's levels to it, but you can figure it out. You can get creative out there if you're in good enough shape, and if you have some craftiness to your game. You're not going to beat people that are much better than you, but you can kind of steal some victories. That's a fun feeling.
Yeah, no, totally. Do you still play? Because I feel like I play a little bit, but not as often as I'd like. And it seems like tennis is one of those sports where, you miss a week and you're back to grade school.
Yeah, I still play. I go in like rushes whenever I get family time with a bunch of other tennis players. We play quite a bit. There'll be like weeks, months where I don't pick up a racket, unfortunately, but sometimes I'll get in a groove and play. But yeah, you have your bread and butter things that you feel like are good. Like my case, forehand's okay. But if I'm not out there serving, it's going to be rough that next time I come back to serving after a little bit. So got to calibrate. I'm not like Angie Kerber, who can just walk right onto a court and make the quarterfinals of the Olympics. So
yeah, only the best can do that, and she was one of the best. Okay, well, thank you for joining me on Ground Pass. I joined you on Inside In a while back, and it was really fun. So can't have Nick, but Mitch, thank you for joining us. So let's jump right into the week of tennis. Now, for those who've been following us on social media, Ground Pass is in Cincinnati. We are in Cincinnati. We do this thing called Ground Pass on site, where we try and go to local tournaments and, tell you what it's like on the grounds and what tickets you should get, what are, the courts you should go on. And we are at the Cincinnati Open. Mitch, I think we were talking earlier, you haven't been, correct?
No, I haven't. I grew up in the Cleveland area, so never made it out. Haven't, as of yet, made it out to Cincinnati or Mason where the tournament is, which I know is just like a stone's throw from Kings Island. So there's no shortage of things to do. But I will say, and you can speak to this, I don't want to hijack your show, but one of the positives that I've heard about Cincinnati is everything's pretty compact. You can get around pretty easily and you can see a lot of tennis, and you're right in the thick of it with players and matches and everything just on top of each other. Don't have to walk around too much.
Yeah, this is my first time at the Cincinnati Open, and you're right. So it's called the Cincinnati Open, but it's not in Cincinnati. You actually have to drive to Mason, Ohio, and it's in Mason. Like you said, Kings Island is right there. It's actually really funny seeing like the rides and stuff from the grounds. But you hit the nail on the head. It is a compact. The easiest thing I can say, it's like tiny little US Open. It's so compact. You can get to every court. And I love it here. I have to say, Yeah. So I've been to a lot of local tournaments in the United States, and I think Indian Wells has this name of tennis paradise. And I think there's a sort of romanticism to Indian Wells. You're in the hills, you're in the desert, it's tennis paradise. Right. It is lovely here in Cincinnati in Mason, Ohio. I really, really love it. I don't know if it's sort of like the small town feel or how small the event is, even though it's 1,000 level event. But I really, really love it here on the grounds a lot.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that the ownership group, Ben Navarro, with Todd Martin running it, that they kept it in Cincinnati. As a biased Midwesterner myself, it used to, about the history as well. Like there used to be an event in Indianapolis, Cincinnati, this road to the U.S. Open series. If they would have lost this tournament, it would have been tough for that region of the country. And it's just been a staple for so long. I'm glad that it has a pretty much permanent home now. What the Cincinnati Open gets, and even though this year is a little more unpredictable with the Olympics and some of the delays, but you're getting an event, a Masters, but also an event that leads right into the U.S. Open. So there are players that have motivation that you wouldn't necessarily get at Indian Wells or other times of the year. This is the last chance to test yourself against the very best in competition. And it can go good or it can go bad, as we're kind of seeing in Canada right now.
Yes, we can. And, it is a very well-attended event. I've been here now 2 days, and the crowds do show up for the event. So I can imagine if they had lost it. It's so funny. I got here early, and Surf Podcast, which is also part of Tennis Channel Universe, they were doing a live show, and Bob Moran was one of the guests, and he's kind of responsible now for keeping the tournament in Cincinnati. And it was really nice hearing him talk about it and how happy they were to stay in Cincinnati. And this is a point I really wanted to bring up, actually, because so as Masters events become these longer 2-week events, so is going to happen to Cincinnati and Canada. But what they're doing in partnership, actually, Canada and Cincinnati are doing this together. They're going to keep their 2 events to 3 weeks total. So they're not going to become a month. Yeah, they're not going to become a month-long event. They're going to keep it. They're going to kind of share it and have it be a 3-week event. But that also means with the bigger draw, bigger event, they are going to, the way he described it is that the moment the last ball is hit at this tournament this year, they're going to start construction for next year to expand the site and make it bigger. And the best thing he said, which is what I love about local tournaments like this, is he says that before, when Cincinnati Open was over, that was it. They kind of turned off the lights and they didn't come back again till the next year for that. And this time they're going to keep it open, and it's going to become kind of like a community center. So they're going to have events, trainings, camp, all that stuff. So it's almost, it's a plus for the community. So it keeps tennis alive all year round, which is what I love. I think it's great.
That's awesome to hear. Construction right away is funny, right? Trophy ceremony. Let's just bring out the tractors and everybody, let's go. The Caterpillars and everything. But I will say, I'm not totally in fan of and I know it's a hot button thing, but every event being longer. I'm not personally a fan of it. I think it's great, but I also that you're giving opportunities to players to be in Masters and there's more events. I think it's a little, I'll say, sluggish at the beginning of some of these tournaments. And also, I do think it's something special when you see qualifying at these 1 week events is like a very good 250 event. You're still seeing good tennis early in qualifying, as you know. It's the Ground Pass podcast, after all, how good qualifying is. But no, I get it. The times are changing, and everybody has to adapt and adjust, and they've done a great job. And I do think working hand in hand is really, Anastasia, the only way, because the U.S. Open isn't moving their dates. So you have to get this tennis in. So there's no way to make it a month long with those two events. And they've done a good job. Bob has obviously done a great job with Charleston. So he's a perfect person for this as well.
Yeah. I wonder if, I think now we've had almost the full year of this 2-week experimentation. And I wonder if other tournaments like Madrid and Rome, can you guys talk? Could it be 3 weeks? Like, could we work it out? Because you are right. Like they kind of start really slow. I like the expanded events only because it gives more opportunities to make a living playing the sport.
I think I'm more.
I do like that part of it.
I think I'm more. I'd like it to be some of each. Like I'm not against what Indian Wells, Miami had, and I think it's good to have a little of both. I still like the 1 week Monte Carlo. Like, let's jump right into it. Then on a Monday you have just insane matchups right away. I get it to where there's some tournaments it's better to just have that balance, but yeah.
Well, let me just tell you a little bit about the grounds. I mean, the grounds are great. It's very interesting. So it's kind of anchored by the center court that is connected to a smaller grandstand court. And it's really interesting because when I say they're connected. There's a tunnel that you go through that connects both. And at first I thought, today I was watching Naomi Osaka, which we'll talk about. I was watching her on grandstand at the same time that there was a match going on at center court. And I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting. Are they not going to just hear each other? But I don't know what they did with the acoustics. You don't. You really don't know anything that's happening at the other court, which is actually very different from, for example, the U.S. Open, where from their grandstand you can hear everything happening at Ash. I don't know what they did there to make it work, but it definitely works. It is a very compact site. There is this court, which is now my favorite court of all of tennis until I find a new one.
Okay.
But they have this court that is sunken into the ground. It's court 10, and it just, the experience of watching tennis in there is so cool because it's almost like what I feel like maybe the Rome Masters, like how they have their sunken court, and it's almost like a Coliseum kind of vibe. And you're
like a bull ring.
Like the games begin. So I like it.
It's just nice to have options, right? Like different. Not every tennis court's the same. This is a new, unique one, a sunken-in court in Cincinnati. And just to mention the acoustics, I think it's great that they figured out a lot of it for some tennis nerds like ourselves out there. They might remember a match in Cincinnati years ago when it was Federer versus Stan, and they had to actually pause part of the match because there was a fireworks show at Kings Island. So that's the first thing I thought about with Cincinnati when you invited me on this.
Yeah, I don't, it's actually really funny looking from the court, so you can just see all the rides and everything. I can imagine that would be a little chaotic if they started a fireworks show. But I really like the layouts of the ground, ticket prices. So, and here's the crazy thing. As far as I'm aware, Cincinnati doesn't actually have a ground pass.
Okay.
They don't. So what you do is you buy either a ticket to center or you buy a ticket to grandstand, and then that lets you into the grounds and you can wander around and stuff. Because
I wanted to ask you, I wanted to ask you a question in the name of the show and everything, and you're the expert to ask, because I've been thinking about this the last couple of years. Ground pass, greatest value. It's also kind of being like what I would call like TikTok trendy. Like everyone realizes now that the ground pass is the way to go. We heard what happened at the U.S. Open last year. I was at Indian Wells this year, and it was, let's say the first weekend, Sunday, Monday, it was hard to get seats. And there's reasons for that. There could be matches that end early, but you go to court 2, I think it was Zverev and Griekspoor, not a single seat. The only match going on, everything was jammed in the upper deck. So I do think that, I don't want to say we need to limit ground passes. I wonder if you have a solution, but it seems like, and with the U.S. Open, where it just seems like they let in way too many people last year on the grounds pass, what is the next step for making sure that these are still valuable, getting grounds passes, but also that you can actually watch some tennis?
I think this is a really great question because as someone who I love the US Open, it's my home tournament, even though it's a Grand Slam. And I've gone every year. It's gotten crowded and, more and more crowded every single year, which is great. I love it. More people loving tennis is good. And the ground pass, it might be the trendy thing, but it's the best thing. It really is a great pass to have. Now, what really upset is a big word, didn't upset me. It's just like, it's frustrating, is that those days when you were on the grounds of the US Open and it was packed to the brim and you couldn't get a seat anywhere and there were lines around to get to the outside courts and everything, there were empty seats at Ash. So Ash is never, I don't want to say never, a lot of the night sessions with big names do get packed and sold out. But for the most part, it is a massive, 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 massive venue to fill.
Right.
And it was just frustrating last year where, you would look at the TV and you're like, there's so many empty seats. There's just so many empty seats and the grounds are packed. And I don't know how to do it. Maybe if they can make, so for example, at Louis Armstrong, the lower bowl of Louis Armstrong is ticketed. The upper bowl is open to ground pass holders. Same thing at Grandstand. Okay. Can they maybe start doing something like that for Ash, especially during the day? During the night, I understand. That's sort of like prime time. Alcaraz is playing, Serena's playing. It's, you're not getting in. But during the day, can we open up the top level of Ash?
Get some like seat filler situations like the Academy Awards. Just,
Exactly.
I think so. I had to tie that in there. And I would also say too, getting to this point and where we are, it's a good thing. Obviously, everyone enjoys tennis. Nothing is bad about more people wanting it. It's just a way to figure everything out. But it is good to see full stadium, one courts across grounds. Like, for example, at the Olympics, it was nice to see Roland Garros full.
Garros full. Yeah, no, it was. It was like all of a sudden, you're like, oh, it can be done. It can be done.
Imagine that.
And so it's almost, tennis organizers shooting themselves in the foot a little bit sometimes, because I'm like, it could look good. Can you imagine Ash during the day? I'm thinking right now of that Tommy Paul Ben Shelton match during the day at Ash. I mean, that was a packed daytime match, but there were still some like right off top where you're just like, man, if you just let all the people on the grounds be like two Americans playing, really big deal US Open. Yeah. I mean, it would be massive. It would be packed, so little things like that. And I don't know the logistics of it, but I'm like, have we tried, is there a way to do it that would maybe sort of release the pressure a bit on the grounds? Because there were moments at the US Open. I will remember also Frances Tiafoe was playing on Louis Armstrong, and every seat was full, and there was a line that had formed around Armstrong waiting to get in. You don't want that. You don't want people spending their day in a line.
Right, you don't. At that point, though, we're in the line probably halfway. You got to realize you're not getting in. It's like basic line rule etiquette. Like, okay, this isn't happening. But
go find another match.
But tennis is having its moment. It's very, very popular, and some of the names you said, especially the Americans, are a reason for that. So I think it's good, and I think these are manageable issues. They're not, problems. They're just issues that can be managed, and the right people are in charge. We hope so. That works.
I hope so, and I think also, in all honesty, fans getting to know more players will maybe also alleviate it, because at the time you're standing in a line watching Frances Tiafoe, I don't know, Thomas Martin Echeverry is playing to a half filled like court down the way, so maybe going to that and learning more about other players is great too. But that was a mini diversion, but I liked it. I liked it for sure. Well, back to Cincinnati again. Great tournament. We do a tournament guide, which is a video that we put on Instagram and YouTube. So stay tuned to our social media. We'll do a full sort of tournament guide for Cincinnati. I would highly, highly recommend visiting if you're in the area, or even if you're not. Like, travel out here, and it's really great. So let's get into the tennis that is happening. So first of all, let's just talk about who is in and who is out of Cincinnati. I think it's not surprising someone like Novak is out this year. It's an Olympic year. He, I think even last year he didn't play Canada and then only played Cincinnati before the U.S. Open. But, Novak's not playing. Nori's out injured.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any names that really surprised you that were not going to be playing?
So in Cincinnati, I don't think there's any surprises. We'll see how Canada finishes up. I think the biggest thing is it's a lot of these players that are playing's first tournament back, and it's one tournament, and then you're right to the U.S. Open. Like we were looking at Alcaraz, he plays in this tournament after the tough defeat in the Olympics. Have you seen what his draw is? Like it's literally Monfils or Popyrin to get to Berrettini or Holger. So and this is the only matches he's going to have hard court, only tournament before the U.S. Open. This is such an interesting and unique, and I'll say weird year for a lot of reasons, an Olympic year, but also the players that haven't played and have question marks. I think there's a lot of question marks at the top of both tours because these players aren't in great form, and there's justifiable reasons for that, and then there's not justifiable reasons for that. I think it kind of widens what we can expect, specifically on the women's side, because last year's finalists are not quite in great form, and that could open the door for some other contenders.
It's funny. So, Aryna Sabalenka she lost in Canada, so she should be landing in Cincinnati soon to start practicing here. And I went to the DC Open and watched her there. And it was, so she hadn't played Wimbledon because of injury, didn't play the Olympics. DC was her first tournament back. And, you saw the rust, even in practice. You were like, wow, she's still rusty.
She certainly did. So I'll say this, and I'm not going to try to make excuses for any of these players. They all have the same injuries, scheduling to deal with. DC didn't worry me at all. It's her first tournament back. I think she got what she needed out of it. Lost to Buzkova. Tough 3-set match. Rusty for sure. With this Canada match, I'm going back and forth whether or not there's still rust there or she just doesn't want to play Anisimova. Well, 5-2 is now the head-to-head record for Amanda, who's proven time and time again. I think she's got 5 top 20 wins. Where he's like, it's insane. She's shown the ability to just wreck a draw by herself, and that matchup is just very favorable to Amanda. I got to see her practice Anastasia in Chicago years ago before she kind of took time off. And if you watch, and there was a lot of players, it was that 500 event in Chicago years ago in October. If you watch the top players, there was a lot of good names in that event. If you see them practice, there's no one that hits a cleaner, harder ball than Amanda Anisimova. So I don't think it's shocking that matchup styles make fights. I say time and time again. That's just somebody that I don't think Sabalenka wants to see. So I'm curious if she gets to Cincinnati, as she kind of rounds into form. I've still said that in a major, her floor is the highest. It seems like she's gotten to quarters, semis just about every time recently. But there's still some rust on there, and there's still instances where she's not at her tip-top level. But I'm looking at today more of like Amanda Anisimova should be and probably will be a top 20, top 10 player at some point. And I don't think there was anything fluky about how she beat her and then kept it going again today, beating Emma Navarro.
It definitely is a funky head-to-head, one that I think because, of course, Anisimova has been out of the game, so it's not something that I think Aryna has seen consistently, or at least at some regularity. So it's going to be interesting to see if Amanda's in and she's going to be on tour now. I love to see it. I love a little bit of disruption. Another person that, you've kind of talked about, like, not quite in form, Coco Gauff. And let me just say, so 2 things kind of caught my eye, surprised me pleasantly. So far, 2 things happened today, and Coco Gauff was practicing. And when I tell you, you could hear the kids screaming for miles. It was so pleasant to see. She's such a huge star. Like, I saw her at Indian Wells. I saw her in Miami, and you kind of had that sort of post-U.S. Open thing a little bit. Yeah. But these kids were, and maybe because she is the Cincinnati champion as well.
Yeah.
They were all over her. I mean, you had kids. There was crying. There was jumping over fences. It was a scene.
Yeah.
And I love to see it, especially with a tennis star to have
Yeah.
that level of fame and, just admiration.
Hmm.
It's really, really nice to see. But yes, Coco is someone who is going to be, I don't know, looking for some sort of form.
So yeah, there's a lot to discuss about Coco. The first thing I'll say is you hit it 100%. Total superstar, built for it. Was just a flag bearer at the Olympics with LeBron James. So that's the kind of person that we're talking about here. Somebody that really is a superstar and carrying the mantle for this sport. And I will point out to all the European listeners that might be listening to this episode, that doesn't necessarily mean better player. So I'm saying superstar, but not necessarily the best player in the world. But look, I'm a big fan of what Coco can do. You can see a lot to like about her game, but what you have to unbiasedly say too is that she's not in the form she was this time last year. Last year she rode high DC, came into Cincinnati, won that, and then won the U.S. Open. Shout out to one of our mutual friends, Gil Gross, for the stat on Twitter after her last loss: 4 straight losses against the top 50. That's not just a blip in the radar. That's something that you have to kind of study and look at. And I know it's going to come back to the forehand, and it's been much maligned, much discussed. I think she just needs to get into a groove. And I know that sounds simple, and I'm not an expert on the X's and O's of tennis in that regard, but she needs the confidence. She just needs to rack up some wins, get that momentum going, because there's so much that she can do. We do spend a lot of time discussing the flaws in her game. I think it's gets lost a lot how young she still is and how much time there is to still add to her collection of wins and major trophies. But this is a rough patch for her. Make no mistake about it. And Cincinnati was a joyous place last year. We'll see if she can recapture that magic, because she's going to need to start changing things up and getting back on the right track. Because the U.S. Open, and we do talk about it on this show as well, Anastasia, how deep the women's game is. There's no guarantees that her first round match is going to be easy there. So I hope for her sake, and I think it needs to be a productive quarterfinal, semifinal run in Cincy.
Yeah, no, I think sometimes it's not as talked about, but I think there is an element of having a good run, having a good few match wins that really does help propel you and take away the doubts a little bit, because you can't be on court with doubts. The moment those start creeping in, I think you can't really play your best game. I wanted to go quick into that's a really good transition into Canada, but I just wanted to mention the second thing I noticed at the, on the grounds today. Jasmine Paolini, her practice, packed.
Yeah, she's a star now too.
No,
it's crazy.
I watched her play. No, I watched her practice. Sorry. I watched her practice at the Miami Open this year to 3 people, and I was one of the 3.
Yeah.
It was her and Sarah Ronnie and me and 2 other people watching her practice for about an hour. And to see the crowds at her practice today, she was practicing with Elena Rybakina, who is also a big name, but they were all there for little Jasmine Paolini, and that was awesome. She has become quite the star.
There's also just something to be said about positivity, and not just in terms of your playing, but also attracting fans and people to like you, because she's just so positive. It's really, and I on the podcast on Inside In with Pekovic, I talked about it. It would irritate me too, and I love Paolini as well. But if I saw someone that was so positive all the time, I'd be like, "How is this possible? How can you just stay so positive?" But that's not a gimmick. You got to interact with her off the court. I did as well. She is a 100% positive, optimistic person, and there's no coincidence that that's helped her own tennis game, and it's attracted a lot of fans, because we've seen improbable, I'll say, major runs to finals and players that have shot up to the top 10, but they haven't, as you know, attracted the fans and had the staying power that it seems like Jasmine does.
Yeah, no, it's so great. It's the same thing Carlos has, Alcaraz. He just is so happy and positive all the time, and Jasmine is bringing that to the WTA, and it's lovely to see people latch onto that and support such a great player, because I think she's awesome. So yeah, that's Cincinnati. It's, things are starting to heat up. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe we didn't talk about Naomi Osaka.
So yeah,
what?
Naomi in qualifying. All right, there's so her run in Canada ends. She loses to Mertens in I think it was round 3 or round 2. that was the same player, Elise Mertens, who beat her in Miami. And I thought Nico Pereira on the broadcast brought a good point up going into that match, that this is like a measuring stick. Take nothing away from Elise Mertens. This is someone that will tell you, are you up to snuff? She's like a gatekeeper to like the top 15, top 10, and a tricky opponent to play. The biggest thing, before I get your take on what it was like to see her play in the qualifying match, how she processes the losses is going to be what determines what this comeback is. This is all uncharted territory for her, in the sense of, when she was coming up the first time, she wasn't worldwide famous. Now she's a global icon has a Hall of Fame career and everything. And we know about the struggles she's been through. This is going to be, and we know it's been tough for her to process losses. That's just a fact of it too. So I loved what I've seen on how she has been handling losing a tough one to Iga, losing to Chin Wen at Wimbledon. I think that's what it was. Yeah. And then going on to this match here, losing to Mertens, but then hitting the ground running in Cincinnati and winning a tough one against a very tough opponent in Blinkova. So I'm just excited and optimistic, because losses aren't derailing the momentum that she's built up.
Right. You're completely right there. And even within a match, because, she ran away with the first set a little bit. And I think Blinkova kind of worked her magic. She's such a tricky player. And I think once she figures out her rhythm and what disrupts you, she just, kind of latches onto that and just, can derail a match. And that's what happened in the second set there. And it was very frustrating. You can see how frustrated Naomi was. But to have her like fight back and come back. And so it was nice to even see that within a match, having it not completely derail you, but like, finding solutions. It's funny, you said a little bit earlier that these smaller 1,000 events, the qualifying feels like a 250, like Anna Blinkova and Naomi Osaka playing in qualifying, like that's
absurd.
It's a main draw match.
That is absurd. I also wanted to just point out quickly, because we could do a whole podcast on just like tennis player. I'll say like, like their ticks or whatever they do, like Rafa with the towels. Yeah. Rafa's got his own chapter. But with Naomi and with her, and I'm sure you noticed this too, and it kind of tells you how engaged she is, it's that like slap on the leg. She's always like right before, you can kind of tell. And I've noticed when, the more dominant it is, okay, she's locked in. This is the one that really matters. So she goes to return. It's that little leg slap. It's like, okay, we're locked in today. So just something I noticed in watching probably hundreds of her matches.
Yeah. Well, again, I think when the draw came out yesterday, there was a little bit of a sort of like, oh, wait, where's Naomi? Because I didn't think anyone really knew. I didn't know that she was going to be playing qualifying. But I like that she is. And I like that she's kind of like, because I was thinking, even if it's just sort of match practice, because we're going into the US Open, and these are sort of the only tournaments that are left before we do that. So it'll be interesting. She has her second qualifying match tomorrow. We'll see how she does and if she gets into the main draw, but she's looking good so far. Looking good. She's,
I think, the 5th or 6th favorite to win the US Open. Just pointing that out there too. And I understand why. She's done it twice before. It kind of shows you where the market is for some of the players not in form. What's Iga going to look like on hard court with not as much prep? Coco and Sabalenka we mentioned. Is this a good time to bring up a player that I think's pretty much getting back, and that's Jessie Pegula? Because I wanted to talk about her.
Okay. Let's first dive in. Well, we might as well. It's time to dive into Canada now. For all the listeners of Grandpa, I have not watched a lot of Canada. Mitch might have watched more than I have, but there are definitely a few stories that have come out of Canada that's happening right now that I did want to talk about. And let's start with Jessica Pegula. Let's do it.
So and this could tie into Cincinnati in the US Open, because we'll see at the time of this, she's going to play Anisimova in the final. But this is a player that going into, not playing RG, Wimbledon didn't go her way. And then the Olympics, which was an interesting showing for all the American women, to say the least. But this is a player that drama all across the board. But she kind of wasn't involved in that drama, so Jessie kind of stayed clear of that. But we were kind of thinking going into this stretch, like this could be a make or break point in her career. 30 years old, had peaked pretty high, made the coaching change. Did she, and that dreaded word, right, Anastasia, ceiling? Did she hit her ceiling, and what would happen? But in watching her play today, specifically against Diana Schneider, who was playing well, I see everything that makes me believe that she's back and she's ready to be near the top of the game for several years. She hits with that underrated pace that really builds her game up so well. It doesn't look like it's as hard, but the advanced numbers will tell us otherwise. But the thing is, like, and watching today's match in the last couple, how windy it was, how the conditions and the elements that would throw off 90% of tennis players, she almost embraces them. I don't think there's a tennis player out there that's just built for any conditions and anything thrown at you. She just doesn't complain, which is another rarity in sports and tennis, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think given how she's looked, given how fit she's looked, and given where the landscape is, she's put herself in that discussion where why couldn't she make that run? I know that quarterfinal round's been the stopper for her. But this is trending into that area where if the door's open, if there's players that aren't at their peak level, Pegula has every right to be considered to be one of the ones that can make a run going into Cincinnati, assuming she plays it after how the final goes tomorrow. But I'm buying the Pegula stock. I think she deserves to be firmly in the mix.
No, yeah, I will say, it wasn't looking good, and based on her results, I was kind of like, was that it?
Mm-hmm.
Was that sort of like the peak Jessica Pegula, just like you said? But there was something that came out of, I think, her press conference in Toronto, where she said she and Coco were no longer going to be pairing up in doubles because they were going to focus mostly on their singles career. And I thought, interesting to do that, because it does mean, then you actually have to take it seriously. And I was like, well, let's see how Toronto goes. She makes it to the final. I really didn't think she was going to make it to the finals based on her form, but I am encouraged by her making it to the finals. And, let's see how far it goes, because her making the semis of a slam soon would be kind of, I think that would be when I'm like, okay, Jessica Pegula is still in conversation.
Right. And it seems like she's too good not to have made one. We understand that not all losses are the same. Same with like Andrey Rublev. You look at who you lose to, like, okay, you play Djokovic or Alcaraz. There's no shame in that. There's some ones that have stung for her, certainly. But I think that a lot of it is how I'm looking and I'm handicapping the field at players at the top. We didn't mention Rybakina, who looks good 1 minute and then has had issues and has had health problems and just, random things that have kind of plagued and snake bitten her season. So the draw is going to be huge in all these tournaments. It always is. But I like Pegula's mind out there as well. I think she's someone else that'll dig in and figure it out. So it shapes up another contender in Cincinnati and going forward to the U.S. Open.
Yeah. What else has been going on? We've talked so much already about Amanda Anisimova, but
can I say too?
Can you imagine if she's?
Go ahead.
I was just saying. It's almost like I don't want to get too excited because I just want her to play tennis forever and just be that person now in the draw at the top of the game, because she just looks like she has the tennis for it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she has stepped away when she needed to. So I'm excited, but I don't want to get too excited. How is it for you?
I think the players want to see her seated. I think that's like the next thing is like, they don't want her to be unseated much longer. So I think that's where we're trending. And when you step away, and I can't put myself in their shoes, certainly the women that have, had children and dealt with that. But when you come back, it kind of forces you in a way to be all in. Svitolina, Osaka, like you could have walked away. No one would have thought anything different. If you're going to come back, you're not going to come back with 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So it gives you that hyper focus and hyper ability to kind of understand why you're enjoying the sport that made you all this successful anyway. So I want to see her keep playing. I just thought quickly you were going to mention Diana Schneider, who's just so fun out there and unique and one of the biggest breath of fresh airs. I should have known that she was going to be here to stay. That first match I ever saw her play against Maria Sakkari in Australia, when Sakkari looked like she was going to just snap at her on the other end of the court, and Schneider cared 0.0%. And I realized, okay, this is somebody that's going to be here. Her game style is unique as well. She plays a lot of topspin. She's an underrated athlete. No shame in losing two sets 2 tight sets to Jessie Pegula, but she's somebody that, again, is in the mix. Also, the silver medal in doubles at the Olympics. So shout out to her because it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think I watched her a bit last year. Every time her matches came up, it was something to watch. But and I liked her style. I love her headband. Her bandana. And by the way, for people who don't know, she actually told this story a while ago. Her parents, or specifically her mom, made her wear it when she was little so that she didn't get sunburned because she's so fair skinned and she has blonde hair.
Yeah.
So they didn't want her to get sunburned. And she just kept it.
It reminds me of Rosie the Riveter. The old photos. Like, that's what I think.
That is yeah, that is such a good reference. But, so I don't know. She's always been a fun sort of addition to the tour. I love when there are unique players out there that kind of you can differentiate their game style and look from everyone else. And that's just what she was for me until this year. And I was like, Diana Schneider, what happened? Like, I don't know what gear she hit this year, but she hit another level.
The match against Coco, and I know a lot's going to be made about Coco not having her best day, but Schneider played excellent. And she ran away with the second set, and she played a smart match too. We never know when players are going to make the leap, right? Look at Sebastian Korda right now. This is somebody that was expected to do this for a long time. You say, why hasn't it happened? But then, of course, there's injury history. There's draw bad luck. Look at all of his losses this year have been to pretty good players. And then sometimes it's just that little extra 1 or 2%, some luck, and you put it all together. And we're seeing it with Schneider. We're seeing it with Korda. We've seen it with players, and we'll continue to see it. We're going to see that with players going forward, and we're going to see that with these two in particular. So I've been excited to see Diana Schneider and as well as Sebastian Korda, who I know we're going to talk about here soon.
Yeah, we can jump right into him. And this is, I think it's a little too soon to say, but is it Sebastian Korda having a little bit of a Coco Gauff moment? You win the DC Open, you go to Canada, you get really far, you show up at Cincinnati. I mean, I think ever since Sebastian came back from injury, before he was injured, he was showing such promise. He gets injured, he comes back, and I think everyone was sort of like, okay, yes, you're jumping right back into it where you were before, and he hasn't yet. And I mean, for me a little bit, I had not given up, but I tempered my expectations. Mm-hmm. I thought, let's just see, maybe this is the new Korda, and this is what we have to deal with. And I think just as I was tempering my expectations, Korda wins the DC Open. What do you think of this little run he's having now, getting so far in Canada?
Well, and I know we're recording this when he's in a battle with Popperin right now, but regardless of whether he wins the match, wins the tournament, or loses here in this round, in the semis, I think with Korda, what we started to see was, it's twofold, right? He's putting together his complete game, which anybody that saw him practice, saw him play, saw that he had the weapons, saw what he did in Australia, beating Medvedev, going on that run there. But figuring out the mental side of it, I know it's cliche, Anastasia, but he's starting to grind out these victories and realize what he has to do, coming back from a set down against Kobeli, who's on a little mini moment of his own, and then just blitzing him in the third. The semifinal match in DC, where it was one-way traffic with Tiafoe, it was just a complete beatdown on Korda's side. Sebastian has thrown himself into the mix where he belongs. It's now 5 Americans, really 4 in the top 15. Tiafoe's the odd man out there, but Korda has every bit of game to be the top-ranked American for a long time. I think if he wins Canada, he'll be the number 2 ranked American. But with Korda, I don't see any weaknesses in his game. If anything, it was maybe between the ears and just the injury luck. And he seems to be sharpening it out. He's put in the work. He grinded his way back after missing all that time with injuries. I don't see any reason why this is a flash in the pan. And I think he's going to be around for a long time. And I might be one of the first to say it too. He might be the smarter bet if we're going to see this major drought end. I think Korda probably would be my bet.
I was just going to bring that up as I look at the live rankings, and basically from 12 to 15 is all American. They're just all bunched up there together. And it's been a long wait. It's been a long, long wait to get a male Grand Slam
Right.
champion at the U.S. Open or anywhere.
Any major, yeah. 21 years
any
now.
Grand Slam. Yeah, so it's kind of like you want to get excited, and I think Taylor Fritz has done a really good job of always trying to remain in the conversation and keep himself up there. But you're right about Korda's game and how he matches up to other players that I think are in the mix to get a Grand Slam. And almost he might have a better chance of all the Americans that are in that bunch.
Right.
Him and maybe, Tommy Paul at this point.
Right. It's funny we didn't say Shelton, and that maybe has been a cooling off period with that. Who I still like, by the way. But the thing with Shelton right now is that the return game needs to get better, or he's not going to be a serious thought to beat the very top. And I'm not saying that Korda can beat the very best in a major yet, but he's trending in the right direction. Taylor Fritz, as you said, couldn't agree more, has carried the mantle phenomenally as the top-ranked American. Korda has youth on his side. He's got a little more pop, I think, on some of his shots. Fritz did a good job kind of improving his net game. I think that's the next thing with Korda, but he doesn't fear these top players. He beats Zverev today in 3 heavy sets. He's done well against Alcaraz, has a victory over him. And Shelton is the other one, I should say. It was funny, too, because that match against Rafa at Indian Wells years ago, Anastasia, was kind of how the first time he was in the mainframe, and he really blew it, to be honest. He had the double break in the third set. But he is somebody that I don't think is afraid of those moments, oddly enough. Like, I think that was just him kind of having his game go away from him. But I think he kind of, maybe it's the family that he grew up in. He kind of thrives to be in the spotlight. Similar to Shelton, similar to Tiafoe. He's someone that's not afraid of the bright lights in the big moment.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, he is in the battle now, but how he does in Cincinnati, and then how he takes that momentum, if he has it into the U.S. Open. A couple of other things to talk about, like real quick. We are, of course, going long as it's our job on Ground Pass to do. There's so much tennis.
Yeah,
can't stop talking about it.
The one name I wanted to bring up is Jannik Sinner, world number 1. He lost to Rublev, which, again, hadn't played, coming off an injury, had issues. I get it. Rublev's a good player. He's sharpening out his game and his mental side, which we all love to see. But we're at a point now with Sinner where I'm a little scared, to be frank, because when he loses, it looks like his body's shutting down. That's not a good sign, especially as we go into the New York City humidity and dealing with these conditions and best of 5 tennis. And I feel like it might be a regression of back to last year, years before, where you got to wonder about, can he go the distance? Because everything else is there. The mindset's there. He's committed to his craft. But that was a little alarming to me to see yet again, like third set against Rublev, body not cooperating. I don't know how you saw it, but.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of the footage of it and the replays, and it seemed like a hip issue, which is what he had in Madrid, I thought, as well. So yeah, I don't know, because again, it's like it'd almost be not better. Better is not the right word, but if it was just like, oh, he didn't play well today, okay. But for it to be his body, it's really tough for it to be that. I did want to mention as well, because I like to mention the doubles and keep them in the conversation. Sure. And in Toronto, we had the Fernandezes.
Yeah, I know.
Who are the mix of Leylah Fernandez and Bianca Fernandez playing doubles together, sisters playing. I mean, it's giving echoes of the Bryan brothers for sure.
I love sibling doubles teams, especially the teams that work out together. It's great to see, and it's also good to kind of see the older sister, the established singles player in this case, really go the extra mile to be there for her sister, to try to elevate her career. Because you know how hard it is to make it in tennis, especially starting out in the doubles round. It's good for Leylah, who could have easily said, look, I got to focus more on singles. I got to get some stuff. But no, they're at home, they're playing, and they're doing very well.
Yeah, I mean, you know what's really funny too? So Layla had lost her singles match and then
Hmm.
had to go play her doubles. And I thought she made this post in social media that was so touching and sweet about how, it was her sister who carried her through that doubles match. And, her sister plays
Hmm.
for UCLA.
Hmm.
And, with this run at the Canadian Open, I think her doubles ranking is going to go up. And I just wonder, I'm like, they should play more together. Maybe they can play for Canada. I think if her ranking is high enough, it would be nice to see them both on tour.
Hmm.
I'm all for,
Yeah.
I think people need a way to latch onto doubles because they're not exactly the most well-known players. And, they'll have mini runs like Harry and Henry that had that like epic run at
Yeah.
Wimbledon and they won. There are teams like that kind of catch the moment a little bit. And just
Yeah.
watching both of them play, Layla and Bianca, I was like, I see that team going far.
It was great. Love to see that. I also mentioned you brought up something I wanted to say. In complete honesty and fairness, maybe not the biggest fan of the 2-week Masters events, but having a 2-week Master event, as my colleague Mark Knowles pointed out, who's in these meetings and was a doubles number one, you're going to have doubles be a bigger part of it week 2, and you'll have more interest in that because you'll have singles players that'll stay around. They'll enter the draw. So I think getting some, not all, I want to keep doubles players having careers, but adding some singles players to the mix, knowing more about their personalities like Henry and Harry and finding out the cool stuff about them, having these storylines like the sisters playing together is going to be good. So I think it's great. I think it's great to have family togetherness and not, like a son firing his dad as coach, like that sort of thing.
This podcast would be
Yeah.
3 hours long if we got into that.
Yes, we would. We certainly would. You know what? That's exactly how I worded it to my dad. Like, you're going to stay on in your role as father. So, yeah, yeah.
Oh man, we love them.
Hmm.
They keep us entertained.
Yeah,
So, well, that was Canada. It's
yeah.
still going on. I think Are we back? I think there's a rain delay at some point. It's been raining in Montreal this whole time. It's been really tough going. So the finals of
Well, they
the
always were
Montreal
Monday.
Open.
They always were
They were
Monday.
always
So that's the
Monday.
thing. But
I
they had to
guess
play double
yes.
duty a bunch. And it confused me
Yeah.
too. Cincinnati is the same way. They staggered it a day each for the Olympics, which makes sense. But I had the same reaction Thursday. I'm like, I haven't even seen Sinner play yet. Like, what's going on? Sabalenka hasn't taken court, but it was Monday. But they did a great job dealing with the ramifications of that storm. And I think, luckily, it's already passed through Cincinnati. So, knock on wood, I think we're going to have good weather in Cincy for some pretty exceptional tennis there.
Yeah, the weather has been great here. So yeah, Cincinnati is this week, and then the ATP have Winston-Salem just before the US Open, and on the WTA side there is the Cleveland 250 and Monterey 500. Monterey is definitely on the bucket list. Like I hear it's a great city, and then to
Yeah.
go watch tennis in a great city, love it. But yeah, that's it. And then we head out to the US Open, which should be very, very exciting. I think there are just so many, maybe mostly on the, you know what, I think both tours, because you're sort of like, well, what's going to happen with the winner of the last, of both sides, like Coco Gauff coming in, not great form. Novak, he wouldn't have played at that point any hard court tournaments, and he'll just go cold into the US Open. But if anyone can go cold into the US Open, it's probably Novak. So yeah, it's gonna be a really interesting tournament, which we'll talk about later as we get closer. But Mitch, thank you for joining me on this edition of Ground Pass. This was fun.
It was so fun. I'm glad to be a guest for a change. You did a great job hosting this show, Anastasia. It's a great show. The only thing I'm disappointed about, I thought you were going to weave in breakdancing from the Olympics into this show. Breaking. I'm sorry. It's called breaking. The B-boy girls and the B-boy guys did a great job. So shout out.
I don't know how I didn't weave it into a tennis podcast. Like I could find a way.
Your eyes are probably better than mine because I watched some of it, and every time I thought someone won, they just got crushed on the scorecard. So I'm not a breaking judge.
I don't know if I don't think it's been a successful debut of breaking into the Olympics, and there probably will be some rethinking of said sport in the future Olympics. Maybe some retooling or different criteria for entry. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we got time. The only direction is up, but no, thank you. This was fun. Love coming on your show. You guys do a great job. You and Nick are great at this. So excited to see where it goes. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And other than Inside In, which, by the way, if you guys who are listening have not watched the latest episode, which is with Petco, one of my favorite tennis commentators, it is absolutely, it's a great episode. But where can people find you, Mitch?
The age-old question, right? I think the best place would be on Twitter at MoneyMitchM21 to follow me there for some tennis and other random takes there. But yeah, just subscribe to Tennis Channel Inside In wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out weekly on the Tennis Bets live gambling show as well. So we've got some fun stuff coming down the pike. There's going to be a lot of player. I will actually be at the WTA 250 in Cleveland on site, Tennis in the Land. So going to get some good player interviews there. I don't think Jasmine Paolini is going to play this year. That was my big get last year. So, but it's always exciting to be on the grounds and to learn from the masters at Ground Pass. So excited for that as well.
We're showing you the ways. That is really exciting. Awesome. That is one tournament that will be on my list for next year to visit, trying to hit them all at some point. But again, thank you for joining, and Ground Passers, we'll see you next week.